Imagine, just for a moment, a world with no trains. It is not so very long ago. 200 years. Perhaps a little more. A world that looks, in some ways, quite familiar. There are towns and cities and farms stretching out between them. There are post offices and newspapers and shops selling bread and cloth and candles. People write letters to each other. People have friends in faraway places. People wonder about the world beyond the next hill. But getting anywhere? Actually going from one place to another? Is a slow and rather tiring business. If you wanted to travel, you walked. Or you rode a horse. Or you climbed up into a carriage, which was really just a wooden box on wheels pulled by horses, and you sat very still and tried not to mind too much as it lurched and jolted over roads that were often muddy, often rutted, often little more than a worn path through the fields. There were no smooth surfaces. There was no easy way. In England, in those days, if you wanted to travel from London to Edinburgh, a journey of about 600 kilometers, it would take you around 10 or 11 days. 10 days of bouncing along in a coach, stopping every night at an inn, hoping the weather held, hoping the horses stayed well, hoping the wheels didn't break on a particularly bad stretch of road. Days. And that was if you were lucky and had money for the coach fare and had nothing heavy to carry. If you were carrying goods, a load of coal, say, or sacks of grain, or bales of wool, a horse could pull perhaps half a ton. Maybe a ton, if you were patient and the horse was strong. Moving heavy things across any real distance was expensive and slow and took a great many horses. The world was very big in those days. Every town was an island in its own way. News took weeks to travel. Food that spoiled quickly could only be sold nearby. If you lived in a city and wanted fish, it had to come from somewhere close, and it had to come quickly, and that put a limit on things. The world was full of limits. And then, slowly, because nothing about this story happens suddenly, the limits began to move. It started with steam. People had known for a long time that steam was powerful. When you heat water, it turns to steam, and steam expands. It takes up much more space than water, and if you trap it in a container, it pushes outward with tremendous force. James Watt, a Scottish engineer, spent years in the 1700s thinking carefully about this, improving a machine called a steam engine that could use this pushing force to do useful work. His engines sat in mines and factories, pumping water out of flooded tunnels, driving hammers and looms. They were large and heavy, and they didn't move around. They just sat there working away, pushing and pulling and turning. But someone, eventually, had a rather interesting thought. What if the engine could move? What if, instead of the engine staying still while it did work, the engine itself rolled along on wheels? What if steam power could carry itself and carry other things along with it? This is the kind of idea that seems obvious once someone has had it, but takes a long time before anyone actually tries it. There were experiments, some of which worked and some of which absolutely did not. A man called Richard Trevithick, who was Cornish and reportedly very tall and very strong and tremendously enthusiastic about engines, built one of the first steam-powered vehicles to move on its own. In 1804, his machine hauled a load of iron along a set of rails in Wales. It moved. It actually moved under its own steam, which is where we get that expression even now, under its own steam, meaning doing something by yourself without anyone pushing you. Trevithick's engine wasn't perfect. It was heavy, and it broke the rails. But it moved, and that was the thing. After that, things got a little more serious. In the north of England, in the county of Durham, there were coal fields. The mines there dug coal out of the earth, and the coal had to be moved from the mines to the ports, where it could be loaded onto ships. This was done, at the time, with horses pulling wagons along wooden rails that wore out quickly, that bent and split, that had to be replaced over and over. Someone got the idea to try iron rails instead. Iron rails lasted much longer. And once you had iron rails, you started thinking about iron wheels. And once you were thinking about iron wheels on iron rails, you started thinking about what might pull those wheels along, if not a horse. A man called George Stephenson was thinking about exactly this. George Stephenson had grown up very poor, in a small village in Northumberland, in a cottage so close to the local wagonway that passing coal wagons were said to rattle the windows. He hadn't gone to school much. As a child, there wasn't time or money for it. But he was fascinated by engines. He spent his own time and his own money learning to read so that he could study engineering properly. He fixed engines in the mines where he worked. He understood how they moved and breathed, the way some people understand music, by instinct and by love of it. And in 1814, George Stephenson built his first steam locomotive. He called it Blucher, after a Prussian general. It could haul 8 wagons of coal up a gentle hill at about 6 kilometers per hour. That is a slow walking pace. but it was better than many horses, and it didn't need to rest or be fed. Well, not in the way a horse does. It needed coal and water, but those were easier to supply. Stephenson kept building. He improved each engine. He learned from every small failure and every partial success. And in 1825, he opened something that had never existed before, the Stockton and Darlington Railway. A real railway. A line of iron rails stretching across the countryside with a steam locomotive pulling wagons along it. On the first day, the locomotive, which Stephenson called locomotion, pulled 36 wagons loaded with coal and flour and a passenger carriage, and around 600 people who climbed onto anything they could find to ride along. Thousands more stood along the route to watch. Some of the onlookers were frightened. Some of them thought the engine would explode, or that the speed, which reached about 24 kilometers per hour at its fastest on a downhill stretch, would be dangerous to human beings. Some people in those days genuinely believed that going fast might be harmful, that the air would be pushed from your lungs, that your body might not be able to manage it. It was fine, of course. It was more than fine. Can you imagine? Standing in a field in 1825, watching this iron machine come past, breathing smoke, pulling wagons and carriages, and hundreds of laughing, astonished people at a speed no horse could sustain for long. It must have been one of the most extraordinary sights anyone had ever seen. 5 years later, there was a competition. The Liverpool and Manchester Railway was being built. A proper passenger railway connecting two of England's most important cities. The railway's directors held a public contest to find the best locomotive. They called it the Rainhill Trials. Several engines were entered, and they had to prove they could pull a load back and forth along a stretch of track several times without breaking down, maintaining a good speed throughout. George Stephenson's entry was called the Rocket. The Rocket was sleek and fast. Well, fast for 1829. It reached nearly 50 kilometers per hour, which was astonishing. Nothing on land had ever gone that fast before, not in a sustained and controlled way. The crowds watching were amazed. Some people said later that it felt like flying. The Rocket won the competition, and the following year, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened for passengers. This was the moment things really changed. The railway was a success, almost immediately, more successful than anyone had quite dared to hope. In the first year alone, it carried nearly 500,000 passengers. People who had never considered traveling between Liverpool and Manchester because it was too far, too expensive, too slow, suddenly found that it was none of those things. The journey that had taken 4 or 5 hours by road took now about an hour and a half. People who lived in one city could work in another. People who had only ever known their own patch of the world could visit somewhere new for the day. The world had become smaller, or, really, it had become more reachable. And then the railways spread. Across Britain, first, then across Europe. Then to America, where the distances were so vast that the arrival of railways changed things in an even more dramatic way. In the United States, a journey from the East Coast to the West Coast, New York to San Francisco, would have taken perhaps 6 months by wagon before the railway. Long, exhausting, dangerous months across mountains and deserts and plains. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, linking the East and West coasts for the first time by rail, that journey shrank to about a week. A week. From 6 months to a week, just because of iron rails and steam. The famous photograph from that day. The photograph taken when the last spike was driven in, when the two halves of the line finally met in the middle, shows railway workers from both ends of the line standing around 2 locomotives that are touching nose to nose in the Nevada desert. Somebody cracked a bottle of champagne over one of the engines. The telegraph wires carried the news immediately across the country. The line was done. And church bells rang in cities on both coasts, all at once, in celebration. It is a very human thing, isn't it, to want to connect up the world? To want to be able to reach each other across the distances. The railways changed so many things that it is almost hard to list them all. And so instead of listing them, let's just wander through a few, gently, the way the countryside wanders past a train window. Slowly, no need to hurry. Food was one of the first things to change. Before railways, the food you ate was mostly the food that could be grown or made nearby. Fish had to come from the coast, which meant that people who lived inland rarely ate fresh fish at all. Milk went sour on long journeys. Vegetables wilted. Fruit bruised. Fresh food was a local thing. With railways, food could travel quickly. Milk could be loaded into special tank wagons first thing in the morning on a farm in the countryside and arrive in the city by the time people wanted their breakfast. Fish could be packed in ice and sent from the ports to cities far inland, still fresh. Oranges and other fruits that had been expensive luxuries because of the difficulty of moving them could suddenly be sold at ordinary prices. The diet of ordinary people improved in a fairly quiet and unspectacular way because trains were carrying things that had never made the journey before. And then there was the mail. Letters had always traveled slowly, carried by horse and coach. A letter posted in London to someone in a distant town might take 3 or 4 days to arrive. With railways, letters could move at the speed of a train. The post office began using railway mail cars, special wagons where postal workers actually sorted letters while the train was moving, so they'd be ready to deliver the moment the train arrived. By the mid-1800s, letters could cross England in a single day. The world of words, the world of communication, of news, of messages between people, sped up enormously. Just because of trains. Newspapers changed too. Before railways, a newspaper printed in London was old by the time it reached most of the country. News was always a little stale, a little behind. With fast mail trains, newspapers could be printed in the morning and read in towns far away by afternoon. The same news, the same day. The country began to feel more like one place, instead of many separate places that happened to share a language. Here is a lovely fact, and rather an odd one. Before railways, time was different in different places. This sounds very strange, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it slowly. Time. The position of the sun in the sky is different depending on how far east or west you are. Bristol is a little to the west of London, which means the sun rises slightly later in Bristol, and noon in Bristol is about 10 minutes after noon in London. Before railways, this didn't matter. Every town ran on its own local time, and there was no reason for it to be otherwise. If you were in Bristol, you set your clocks by the Bristol sun. If you were in London, you set them by the London sun. The difference was small, and nobody traveled fast enough for it to matter. But then, trains started running to timetables. A train that left London at 9 o'clock in the morning was supposed to arrive in Bristol at 11, but 11 o'clock in London was 11 o'clock, Bristol time plus 10 minutes. So was the train on time or not? And what did the timetable even mean? It was confusing. Genuinely confusing. Different stations set their clocks differently. Passengers missed trains because the clocks didn't agree. It became clear over a period of some years that something would have to change, and eventually it did. The railways introduced what they called railway time, a single, standardized time that would apply across the whole country. Greenwich Mean Time, set by the clocks at the Royal Observatory in London, became the standard for everywhere in England. And then, as railways spread across the world, countries and later the whole globe sorted themselves into time zones, coordinated and consistent, all because of trains. The invention of the railway accidentally invented modern time. Isn't that something to drift away on? railway stations were extraordinary places. The early stations were modest enough. A simple platform, a ticket window, a waiting room with a fire if you were lucky. But as railways grew and prospered, the stations grew too, and the great stations of the Victorian age were built to be cathedrals of travel. Iron and glass, vaulted roofs that let in light from above, great curving arches. Paddington Station in London, St. Pancras, the Gare du Nord in Paris. These places were built to say, "This is important. This is the future. This is something magnificent." And people responded to them. Going to the station to see someone off on a journey was an event. Coming home on a train and walking out of the station into the city was a kind of arrival that felt significant. There was something about the scale of the stations, the noise of steam and iron and departure, that made ordinary travel feel like a beginning or an ending of something. Children in the 19th century grew up with railway stations, the way children now grow up with airports. The smell of coal smoke, the hiss of steam, the echo of announcements off those great high ceilings. The boards showing destinations, names of towns, times of departure, platform numbers, all clicking and changing. The platform itself, with the train waiting alongside it, impossibly long. The engine at one end breathing slowly while people hurried past with luggage. There is something about that moment. Standing on a platform while a train waits, that still carries a particular feeling. Even now, if you have ever stood on a platform and heard the sound of a train approaching through a tunnel, or felt the air shift as it arrives, or watched the windows of carriages slide past and slow to a stop, there is something ancient and satisfying in it. Something that goes back a long way. The sound of a train is its own kind of music. The rhythm of wheels on rails, clickety-clack, clickety-clack. The steady percussion of iron on iron is one of those sounds that seems, somehow, designed to be soothing. Early railways were built with gaps between the sections of rail, small spaces to allow for expansion and contraction as the metal heated and cooled. And as the wheels crossed those gaps, they made that sound. Clickety, clack. Over and over, regular as a heartbeat, steady as breathing. Generations of people fell asleep to that sound. Long train journeys, especially at night, were among the most reliable sleep-inducing experiences ever accidentally invented. The rhythm, the slight swaying of the carriage, the warmth, the darkness outside the window, all of it conspiring together to settle you down, to make wakefulness seem unnecessary and sleep seem very easy. There were sleeping cars. whole carriages on longer trains fitted out with bunks, narrow beds folded up during the day and let down at night with curtains around each one for a little privacy. You could board a train in the evening and wake up somewhere completely different. You could cross a country in your sleep, arriving somewhere new while you were still dreaming. The railways made that possible. The miracle of traveling while you rested, of waking somewhere new without the discomfort of the journey. George Pullman, an American businessman, made a particular art of the sleeping car. His Pullman cars were famous for their comfort: polished wood, soft upholstery, real beds. You could have dinner at a proper table in the dining car and then retire to your sleeping berth and watch the dark countryside slide past and then, gradually, close your eyes. The Pullman porters, who worked in those cars, making up beds and bringing meals and attending to passengers' needs, were often among the most skilled service workers in America, and many of them became prominent figures in their communities over the following decades. Long train journeys have a particular quality. They are slow enough that you can read or talk or think or simply watch. The world moves past at a pace you can follow. You see the edges of cities, the backs of houses, the gardens, the industrial places that are hidden from roads. You see hills and rivers and fields at eye level from the ground at the pace of a thought. There is nothing to do but be on the train, and so people who travel by train tend to think or dream or simply be. It is a kind of enforced peace. In India, the railways came in the 1850s and changed the country in ways that are still felt today. India is an enormous country, and before railways, it was extraordinarily difficult to travel any distance. The first line, 16 miles long, running from Bombay, opened in 1853, and within decades there were thousands of miles of track crossing the subcontinent. Farmers could sell their crops in distant markets. Salt and cotton and spices could move cheaply across huge distances. People who had never left their district could now travel. There is a story, one of many, about how the railways helped ordinary people in India experience their own country in a new way. Pilgrims, who for centuries had made long and difficult journeys on foot to holy sites, could now travel by train. Pilgrim specials, trains running during religious festivals, carried hundreds of thousands of people to places they had always wanted to visit, but never had the means to reach. The railway made the sacred geography of the whole country available for the first time to ordinary people. In Russia, which is the largest country on Earth, the Trans-Siberian Railway was built between 1891 and 1916. It runs from Moscow to Vladivostok on the Pacific coast, a distance of nearly 10,000 kilometers. It is the longest railway line in the world, and a complete journey from one end to the other takes about 7 days. 7 days of rolling through birch forests and steppes and mountains and tundra across the country's extraordinary breadth. There are small stations in the middle of nowhere where the train stops for a few minutes and local people come to sell food through the windows, fish, bread, pies. And then the train moves again and the forests close back around it. Clickety-clack. Clickety-clack. There is something to be said about the people who built the railways, because it was not easy work, and it was done by enormous numbers of ordinary people with ordinary hands. The Irish navvies, navigators they were called, a word that comes from an older kind of canal worker, who built much of the British railway network in the 1830s and 1840s, moved across the country following the lines as they were laid. They lived in temporary camps alongside the work. They dug cuttings through hillsides with picks and shovels and wheelbarrows. They blasted tunnels through rock. They built viaducts, bridges of many arches, across valleys and rivers. In America, Chinese workers labored through the Sierra Nevada mountains, drilling through granite with hand tools in winter conditions that were genuinely punishing. In Africa and Asia and South America, local workers built lines through landscapes that had never seen iron rails before. All of them, tens of thousands of people in country after country, built something that changed the world, and most of them are not remembered by name. What they left behind is the network. The lines that still run, in many cases, on routes laid down 150 years ago. The tunnels they blasted through mountains. The viaducts that still carry trains across valleys, still graceful, still sound. When you ride on a train today, if you have ever ridden on a train, or when next you do, you ride on something built by all of those hands, and it is rather wonderful to think about. By the end of the 19th century, railway networks covered most of the globe. You could, if you had enough money and enough patience, travel from London to Singapore almost entirely by rail, passing through continental Europe, crossing into Russia, taking the Trans-Siberian Line east and then south through China. People wrote books about such journeys. There was a romance to the long-distance train that nothing else quite matched. The Orient Express ran from Paris to Istanbul, two cities that feel, in a way, like opposite ends of Europe. It ran for many decades, through countries that changed their names and governments and borders, through wars and peacetimes and all the varieties of history. Agatha Christie set a famous mystery novel aboard it, which tells you something about how the train existed in the imagination of that era. It was a small world, complete in itself. Dining cars and sleeping cars, and the clickety-clack of rails through the night, through forests and mountains and river valleys, through darkness that hid everything, and morning light that revealed it all again, changed. There is something dreamlike about that. The way a long train journey suspends ordinary time. The way the world outside the window keeps changing while you stay still. The way you can be in France when you go to sleep, and somewhere else entirely when you wake. It is as close as ordinary life gets to actual magic. Trains and steam locomotives began to be replaced in the mid-20th century by diesel and electric engines. Coal smoke gave way to cleaner methods of propulsion. The steam engine, which had been the heart of the railway for 130 years, became a historical thing. Something preserved and celebrated and taken out on special occasions, breathing and sighing and smelling of hot metal and fire. But the railways themselves kept going. Electric trains in Japan reached remarkable speeds. The famous bullet trains, the Shinkansen, which began running in 1964, were smooth and fast and extraordinarily reliable, arriving within a minute of schedule as a matter of routine, sometimes within seconds. High-speed rail in France, Germany, Spain, China. Trains that cross countries in hours, that connect cities in ways that feel closer to traveling through air than through earth. And yet, they are still trains. Still the same idea, a vehicle that runs on rails, that carries people and things from one place to another, that goes its own way regardless of traffic or weather, following the line wherever the line was laid. The same idea that George Stephenson had in a cottage in Northumberland 200 years ago, refining and improving his engine by lamplight in the evenings. The last thing to know about trains, and it is a gentle thing, worth ending on, is what they did to people's sense of possibility. Before trains, most people lived and died within a small radius of where they were born. Not everyone, of course. There were travelers and merchants and sailors and soldiers who went great distances. But for most ordinary people, the world was small. Your county, your town, perhaps a nearby city if you were lucky. That was your world, and the world beyond it was mostly rumor and imagination. The railways opened that up, gradually, and then all at once. A child who grew up near a railway line in the 1850s knew, in a way that no child 50 years before could have known, that the world was reachable. That the places on the map were actual places, places you could go. That news from far away was not abstract, it was real, and it arrived by train. That the fish on your plate might have been in the ocean yesterday morning, carried by rail overnight. That a letter posted today would be answered in a few days, not a few weeks. The world shrank, and in shrinking became real. More real than it had ever been. and people who had never imagined themselves traveling started to imagine it. And some of them went. That is perhaps the most extraordinary thing about trains. Not the speed, which wasn't always so very fast. Not the power of the engines, though they were impressive. But the way they changed what seemed possible. The way they made the world a place you could move through, rather than a place that happened around you while you stayed still. And so now, if you find yourself on a train someday, or if you have been on one and you remember it, remember the way the world moves past at that steady, unhurried pace. The way towns appear and then disappear behind you. The way the rhythm of the wheels is always there underneath everything else, constant and quiet. The way the light changes as you move from morning into afternoon, or from afternoon into evening. That rhythm, clickety-clack, clickety-clack, is the sound of 200 years of travel, the sound of a world learning to move. The sound of people crossing distances that once seemed impossible, carrying letters and fish and coal and oranges and all the ordinary remarkable contents of a life, rolling across the countries of the world on iron rails that were laid down one length at a time by hand. Clickety-clack. Clickety-clack. The fields go by outside the window. The sky is very wide. Somewhere ahead, the line curves gently to the right and disappears into the distance. And the train, which is in no hurry at all, rolls quietly on.